There we go. I haven't a clue as to why that didn't work the first time around, but we've picked a special track. If anybody ever wanted to know what it sounded like on ThursdAGE inside Owen's brain.
Yeah, if you show me a picture of something that Jacob has drawn and ask me to stat it up, this is what my internal monologue sounds like.
I love it. I love it. It's kind of catchy, and it's kind of obnoxious.
Which is perfect for us.
It is. It absolutely is the summation of our parts. It's ThursdAGE. It's Owen Casey Stevens. It's your disembodied pal Troy, and we're talking about the Lizard Wizard's Golden Gizzard in a Blizzard Hazard, and this is all you, wasn't it? It's all like kind of all your idea. I think it's a brilliant one because we're talking about managing people around the table while you're playing an adventure that may focus on only one person within that group. Um, there we go. It's kind of catchy, says Chris. Yes, absolutely, kind of catchy. But yeah,
That music evolves the longer you do that, or you're slowly driven insane and you think the music is evolving.
I think the latter is probably the accurate diagnosis. All right, so Owen, talk to me about the idea for today's subject, and
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're talking a little bit about managing your players. So we're talking about managing your players in a specific situation. That is a situation where one or a small subset of the characters that the players have gone off to do something, and they are not doing the same thing as everybody else. So you're having to deal with the situation while there's a group of players and characters not involved. And when we were trying to do this the first time around, Troy asked me, "Does that happen a lot?" And of course, that varies based on your gaming group, but it goes back to the common idiom of gaming: don't split the party. And in many cases, people feel that the don't split the party advice is because adventures are often built for a specific group of people or a specific possible subset of people. So if you've set up an adventure so that you expect 4 characters or 5 characters, somewhere in there, to be challenged by most of the encounters in the adventure, and that group decides to split into 2 groups of 2 people, and those 2 people run into something, what they're going to run into is likely to be a thing that when the writer or the GM was creating it, they expected 4 player characters to be there, so you're going to be overpowered. There's also, especially in games with sort of role protection, it can be difficult to have all of your roles in one place, right? You want your warrior to be there to absorb damage and deal heavy damage. You want your mage to be there to blast things and deal with weird questions and runes and dispel magic. And you want your rogue for ranged combat and stealth and intrigue. And upcoming, when we have the core rulebook, you're going to want your envoy to talk to people and help coordinate the players. And if you split up, if you have just the envoy and the mage in an encounter, and that encounter assumes that there will be a warrior there killing things quickly, they're going to be in trouble, even if they maybe brought more people along.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be a problem from that point of view, that if the game is designed around a certain character balance and you have groups who are encountering things without that balance, it can be a problem for the players. But there is a different issue on why you might not want to split the party, and that's that if you split the party, the GM may well not have encounters to unleash at everyone simultaneously. So if 2 characters go off or 1 character goes off to deal with their nemesis in the basement of the Mellon Brothers bank, while no one else is around, no one knows that it's happening, and he's in a big long fight, that has to get addressed. But during that time, all the other players have nothing to do, so they are bored. Some groups don't have a problem with that. Some groups are perfectly happy to watch and comment and kibitz and maybe play on their laptops or their cell phones. Or
Well, that's unusual, really. I mean,
I don't know that it's unusual anymore. I think it's very much a question of what is the group dynamic. There are groups for whom that would be considered maddening or even rude. But I have also played with perfectly happy game groups where you're gaming in one room and there's an Xbox set up in the other room, and if your character's not involved in something, you just go play on the Xbox until they are.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
if everyone's happy with that, it's not an issue, right? So the first thing you've got to ask yourself, if you're not worried about the game mechanical elements, because a GM may have situations where one player can, if they're not in a fight, if they're spying or listening or gathering information, they may even be able to do it more easily than a whole group. Um, but if the situation is that you've got a number of players that don't have anything to do at the moment, and everyone's okay with that, there's genuinely no problem, concern, boredom, worry, it doesn't violate your group's social contract, then you can just not worry about it. But uh, I don't think you can safely assume that's the case. So you want to discuss such things with players, preferably before they come up if it looks like it might be an issue. So in the rest of cases, frequently it is a matter of a group that prefers to have everyone be involved, or at least be involved pretty quickly. Like if you're doing the sort of thing where everyone's gone to town and they're all going on their own little micro adventure. I need to buy some salt-tipped arrows because we're going to deal with a vampire that can only be killed by those, and someone else wants to go talk to the local church, and someone else wants to see if the blacksmith can put an extra edge in their weapon, and someone else wants to go talk to the Adventurers Guild and see if there's any information that can be bought about the upcoming adventure. You can handle that sort of thing by just going from person to person, because each of them is going and doing one thing. So it's not a complex encounter. So yes, theoretically, while each one character is doing something, everyone else is sitting around, but that's the way it works in a fight too, right? If the warrior is smashing someone, no one else is doing something at that exact moment, although that can change depending on what you have in the way of abilities.
Right.
If you've got a mage with the Fate Arcana, they may well be paying attention at everyone's turn because they can alter die rolls and add stunt points and do things reactively to other people's turns. But if you keep things short and everyone has some short thing to do, or even most people, you can just hop from one to one just like you would in a fight. What gets problematic sometimes is when unexpectedly you have a player say, hey, it turns out I now have this cloak of stealth, and we know that there is a entire enemy camp. I'm going to turn on my cloak. I'm going to sneak into camp, and I'm going to try and map the whole thing out and poke around and try not to be discovered. And that can be an important part of the narrative. It's not even necessarily unreasonable from a narrative point of view, but you can't just say, okay, that happens. What do you do during that time? Oh, well, I'm going to sleep. So that's not the same amount of spotlight time as a player. And you can, as a GM and as players, there are things you can try to do to make that a more involving experience for everyone.
Okay. So I was thinking about this, about the things like this, or shifts in the narrative that focus on a particular player. Is that does that is that largely planned, or do you see occasions where it is just who knew it would go this way? Suddenly one person is out there, hunting the lizard wizard.
Another, yeah. I mean, if you say that there's going to be a gizzard blizzard, you never know how people are going to react.
Right.
So I think there are occasions which it is planned for, and I think if you plan for it, that makes it easiest to deal with. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So there's sort of tips and tricks you can do if you have to plan for such a thing. But it does sometimes come up where just the players and the GM make decisions that the others aren't expecting, and as a result, somebody is off on their own. And that can be one or more players kind of going rogue from the expected plot line, right?
Mhm.
You see a group of merchants who cheated you earlier with their laughing to themselves as they take the fat loot that they bought from the money that they cheated you from, and they head out of town. And the GM is presenting that as, here's part of the ongoing world, and you all know what road they were on. You can go deal with it later. And then you have one player say, nah, no, while everyone else is asleep, I'm going to sneak out in the middle of the night. I'm going to hunt them down, and I'm going to kill them all and get our stuff back. And that is a unexpected, unplanned event where there is nothing stopping the character from going out on their own. It's just not expected. It's not the norm. It's not how they usually operate. And you got to deal with that then. One of the ways you can deal with those things, and I think it is sort of both the least satisfying and the most effective, is to tell the player you'd rather not do that. I am a big fan of not trying to fix out of game problems with in-game solutions, right? So you could say, well, you go and you look at them and they've got twice as many guards as you thought, so it's a bad idea. But then you're changing the world and trying to stop this out of game problem that someone is doing something and eating up spotlight time where no one else gets to do anything with an in-game solution that might not have anything to do with it, right? They might say, well, twice as many guards is fine. I'm just going to stealth and I'll try and sneak poison into their coffee pot or whatever.
Right.
So that may not have any solution. Whereas it's not as satisfying, maybe. But if you say, hey, I get that your character wants to do that, but I don't want everyone else to sit around and not have anything to do while we do deal with that. Are you okay with just deciding your character's not going to do that? Or you mention it to someone and they decide you're all going to go. You can have an out of character conversation about what the issue is and how to avoid it being a problem. If you know that these things are going to happen, if someone said that they're going to do that in advance, or even part of your plot is that you want something to happen in an individual character, right? Like maybe the rogue is being considered for a position of leadership within the rogues guild. That's the only rogue in the group. And there is a gauntlet, a test for that. So they have to go to do some stuff. You can plan for that and work around it in a number of ways. And I think that can be the most satisfying way to handle it, but it takes some forethought and it only works if you know it's coming. So for example, in the guild test example, you could, for example, say, hey, we're going to do that. Why don't you come to the game session an hour early and I will just run that for an hour. And then in another game session, maybe the mage will get to do some research and talk to a genie, and he'll have him come in an hour early. And then in another session, maybe the warrior is going to end up being in a fight in a back alley. And you just give everyone individual spotlight time that occurs when the other players literally aren't present. That works well mostly. There are a couple of drawbacks. First of all, if you say, hey, why don't you show up an hour early, and the thing takes 3 hours, for 2 hours of that, people are still sitting around waiting for something to happen. You really need to make sure that all the players get that kind of opportunity. And it can be, not only can it be difficult as a GM to think of individual things for all the players, but sometimes the characters are very much not taking the bait to be alone, right? If you try to give everyone spotlight time, but one of the characters is a paranoid rogue who doesn't want to go anywhere by themselves, you might have trouble getting them off by themselves, even if the player wants it to happen, because it doesn't seem in character to take that kind of risk. And if something happens that character wants to tell the other players, you now have a period of time in which they are just having things explained to them. If someone's going to be apart from the rest of the group for a relatively short period of time, one of the best ways I've seen it happen is to assure everyone else, hey, this won't take long. We're going to go ahead and do it. Have the player decide, yes, I'm going to tell other people probably what happens here. And then if the players pay attention, when that character comes back in the group, instead of having to go through the whole thing again, they can just say, okay, I tell the other characters what happened. The players were paying attention. They saw. So that works out if it's relatively short. You can also get players involved in other ways. If it is an event that is going to have NPCs, for example, you can have other players play NPCs temporarily so that they've got something to do and they're involved in the situation. So if you're saying, hey, it's going to be this guild challenge and the rogue has to go through this stuff to prove that he can be a master rogue, you can say, and since you're going to be in a position of leadership, you're being given 3 newbie rogues with almost no experience, and you have to get them alive through this gauntlet. And then you have the other players play those newbie rogues. You say, temporarily, you guys will be playing. We'll go ahead and give experience to your characters. We'll briefly describe what they did. Maybe you got in a bar fight, whatever. But for this game, you're going to be playing these other rogues, and they're less powerful, and they're not your characters. But if the main player character gets you successfully through this, it will work well. Rain just mentioned, I've managed to split the party 3 ways, each in 3 separate encounters. It was rough, but exciting. Definitely something you need to plan for. And that is another way you can do this. Instead of having things happen, so I will have you by yourself outside of the group, and then I'll do that for another person to do it another person. You can set things up so that everyone's solo encounters have roughly the same level of complication and run them at the same time. A simple example of that is if you have set up a campaign world where, hey, there are teleporting serpent folk assassins who may try and kill you at any time. and you want to have narratively those individual fights where they try and put you in a corner and stab you, you can just say, okay, at this day, at this time, your character is in the bakery, and your character is talking to a blacksmith, and your character is picking herbs in the woods, and each of you are jumped by two lizard folk assassins, and then you just run it as a fight, but at 4 different locations for the 4 different players. So each person goes on their turn, etc. And apparently that there's going to be an opportunity to split the party in an upcoming adventure or Age Creators Alliance adventure, which I think is very exciting.
I think that's really exciting too, and I love that is kind of a wrinkle to kind of mix in to play, because I think it's a fun challenge for everybody. One of the things that I was going to say is I think that in long-running, long-standing games, that people should get a spotlight.
Yeah,
That you should think about, like, giving everybody their turn, sort of, whether it's at the helm or a focus of a storyline or a moment to kind of go it alone against the lizard wizard and do your thing. I think that is a moment to let people really flex and have some fun with their character, kind of a great mid-campaign sort of spike, in interest and texture, for your story. Uh, but yeah, let's see this.
Yeah, so
Says
Chris McGuire points out, not every player is going to want to play some random character that's not theirs. They came to play the game for their character. And for some players in some situations, that's true. Again, that was one of the situations where I said it works better if you plan in advance. You can say, hey, this person wants to, we're going to have this individual event. How do you all feel about playing these other characters? You check with the players. Some people are going to love the idea of an opportunity that, hey, I'm going to play a bumbling idiot that makes this guy's life harder, and I might get killed, and that doesn't inconvenience my actual character any, or I get a chance to play a rogue, and I've only been playing a mage. Or you can even say, hey, it might not be as exciting for you, but we will do something that focuses on your character later. It's just one tool in the toolbox that you can pull out and check with the other players and see what they think.
And the supposition here is you can suppose that the groundwork will have been done. Nobody should be surprised. And if you are surprised, it should be like, okay, let's pause here for a minute and talk about what this means, and that's definitely something that can be done.
But
Ren, I'm
good
really
communication when you're doing anything out of the norm as a game master or as a player, good communication is a great way to handle it.
Yeah.
You can, and that's one of the places where I'm saying I don't like to try and use in-game solutions for out-of-game problems. If there is a player who is constantly separating themselves, it's reasonable to pull together the group and say, hey, group, this keeps happening. How do we want, as adults who have all agreed that we are all here to try and help everyone have a good time? That's one of my baselines for group A gaming with on a regular basis. What can we do to overcome this problem? Another way that you can do these things is to not run them at the same level of granularity that you run a whole fight. And we've got challenge tests and we've got advanced tests in Fantasy Age where you can say, look, I'm going to describe all the challenges that your rogue faces, and we're going to treat this as one advanced test, and we will see if you can successfully overcome the challenges in the time frame. But it's 4 or 5 checks, that's it, and then that's done, and we go on. Rather than saying, you see a 10 by 10 room, there are 2 chests, one of them is a mimic, one can only tell the truth, the other can only speak in Swahili, and get through the room. Instead, you say, there are these kinds of challenges, these are the tests you'll have to make, and you need to make them by this amount of time to succeed. So you can really boil things down. You can do the same thing with of fighting, right? If there's a bar fight, you can say that the warrior has gotten into a bar fight. Hey, make a fighting test, and we will use that to determine how well did you do. And this is one of those places where the target numbers for tests can be super useful, because you can say this is a average difficulty bar fight. So we don't have to go round by round by round by round to get into the bar fight. We just say it's average difficulty. It's nothing spectacular about this bar fight. Hey, make a test. Oh, you passed it. You'll win the bar fight. Let's pick a couple of interesting moments that happened. You grabbed a guy, you ran him down the bar and smashed everyone's strength with him. Someone through the window. You smashed someone with a chair. Great. That's the fight, and it's done. And then you save the more detailed point-by-point things for when the whole player group is around. And some of that depends on how important is this, call it a side trek, right? How important is this character being off on their own narratively? If it's just to try and build their story, I want my character to be the kind of dwarven warrior that when we get a bunch of money goes and parties too hard and gets into a bar fight, and I want to know how I did at the bar fight, or I went gambling, or I went gathering herbs. Those don't have to be whole long little adventures. We can just say, okay, here's the test. Rain mentions advanced tests are a real gem of the games. Just look up the advanced test rules. They're in the basic rule book. We're going to cover them again in the core rule book when it comes out next year. And just make a few rolls, determine how it went, and then get back to the adventure. And I think often that is the best solution, because it does let that person get their spotlight time. Yes, you're by yourself. Yes, you did this thing. And it's taken care of. Chris says, usually with my players, it's more splitting up for mostly role play scenes with some possible roles for skill checks and trying to have a sense of how long to hold on one scene before switching. Yeah, that's important, and that's where you really need to have a conversation with your players, right? If you are splitting them up for role-playing scenes and you say, hey guys, these I could hop every 5 minutes, I could hop every 10 minutes. Are you okay if these take 20 minutes? The longer you're sticking with one scene, on the one hand, the more continuity that scene has. On the other hand, the longer you're asking everyone to sit around. And if it's just for 5 minutes, and you got 4 players, and they each get one, that means that someone does something for 5 minutes, and then for 15 more minutes, they're out of it. And that can be a long time to not get to do anything in a role-playing game. If your players don't have an issue with that, great, fine. If they do, you sort of need to look at what are the various tools and tips and tricks that will work with it. One possibility is to try and, instead of having them an individual, go in small groups. Okay, instead of one person going and talking to the head of the guard, we'll have 2 characters go. Then the 2 of them can do something for 5 minutes. Then the other 2 players can do this different thing for 5 minutes. Then no one's had to sit around for more than 5 minutes. We've got through all 4 players, and then maybe both groups of 2 then go and do 2 other issues. So we still have 4 spotlight scenes. But instead of only being able to be active in 1/4 of the total scenes, every player gets to be active in half the scenes, and we can get through all of them in half the time. You can also see what your players think is a good way to handle these things. I think having a conversation with the players is the crucial best solution. And sometimes it varies by game. I had a game session in recently where, I'll be honest, I was tired and I was playing a very skill light, combat heavy character.
Yeah.
And the GM put out this plot line that was dealing with raising questions and doing investigations. And after about 10 minutes, the GM said, Owen, are you okay? You're not really getting involved in this. And I'm like, you know what? I don't feel like my character's going to be involved with this. I'm a little tired tonight anyway. I'm fine just listening. Everyone here is being entertaining. I'm okay knowing this, and I presume they're going to tell me what's going on at the end. So I'm happy to just watch and listen for a half an hour, however long that takes, and then my character will get in. But that was a case where the GM proactively asked me, are you okay? You're not getting very involved. Is there a problem? And I was able to say, no, there's not a problem.
I like that. And I also, I think that is a key talent of the GM, is to get a sense of what's happening around the table, just in, kind of emotionally, and and to head off any of those things, as they come. And in your case, it was probably great that you could just kind of sit and listen and chill out a bit, and still be able to hang out with your friends whom you love, and or people that you enjoy playing with, but not necessarily have to be on. And that's great. And so I have a question for you. A lot of this stuff, we talk about the interpersonal aspects of tabletop roleplay gaming, because it is essentially all that we're doing, interpersonal interactions. And my question for you is, how do you, or what's a thing that you've done, maybe even specific to, like, giving people their solo kind of opportunity to be in an adventure? What do you do to build that camaraderie if you are with a group that you don't necessarily know that well?
So the first thing is, if you don't know a group that well, I actually recommend, other than starting with, hey, when I run a game, telling people we are all here to help everyone have fun. That's important, and that goes a long way. If you don't know a group well, I recommend avoiding sort of these kind of corner cases of needing everyone to buy in, something happening a little different, unless the entire event has been set up for that, right? If you are
Mhm.
running a game at a convention and you have pitched the game as, hey, we're going to have 8 players and each of you is going to have 5 minutes of action time, and at the end of 40 minutes everyone will vote for the person they thought handled the 5 minutes the best, cheese and crackers and puns welcome, then that's what people are signing up for. That's again a case of communication. I have also done things like, these are just tricks that you offer up to the players. You never force them to do it, but you say, is anyone interested in? So, for example, you can go, all right, you are going to be doing the voiceover for this scene.
Mm.
So pretend that your character wrote a journal entry about this that 2 generations later is going to be read, and do your best Morgan Freeman impersonation. And then you are involved, because whenever the person who's actually getting involved, if the warrior is involved in a barroom fight and is like, I am now going to smash you with this chair, and he misses, then your job is to say, he did not smash him with a chair. He never successfully smashed someone in a chair in that entire ballroom brawl. But the story of the chair smashing went on for a significantly long period of time. You just find ways to get them involved. If people are super connected just and only to playing their character, those are not people that are likely going to want to sit around for long periods during other people's spotlight time. And that is one of the
Yeah.
reasons I said one of the solutions that you can come up with is to set aside spotlight time that occurs while the other players aren't present. You just have to make sure that you are equitable about that, that people are warned in advance, they know that's sort of how the campaign is going. Um, when I was much younger, before I determined that communication was an important way to overcome a lot of these problems, there were a few games I were in where it was very, very normal for the 2 people who were roommates to have one of their characters say, all right, I'll look into this and report back tomorrow. And then, because they were roommates, when it wasn't the game, that person would have 5 different adventures before they came back, have gained 2 levels, and we have to sit around for an hour while they tell us everything that happened while we weren't around. That is
Mm.
a bad example. That's a bad way to handle doing stuff when people aren't present. But that is different from saying there are going to be occasions which someone might need some solo time. We'll talk about it. We'll set up a time. It'll be a specific amount of time. And my intent is that everyone who wants that kind of spotlight time will get it over the course of the campaign. And again, that's something that's not likely to happen for a one shot. If it's something short, you can sometimes say, okay, this person really wants to talk to the guard. He really wants to do it privately. We've been playing about 2 hours out of our 4-hour session. Everyone take a bio break. Go grab some water, grab some snacks, change out your dice, rotate your tires, whatever you want to do. Come back in 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, this will be done regardless of how long we have managed to get through it, right? We'll do 10 minutes of it, and after that, it will be broken down to a die roll. And you can say to the person who's getting the 10-minute solo time, because it's just not fair to make people wait longer, right? We're all here.
Mhm.
We have all blocked out this time. So this is the way we're going to handle that. In my experience, as long as you are dealing with, let's say, reasonably adult, reasonable people,
Yeah.
and you outline with people in advance, this is tricky. There may not be a perfect solution. Here's what we're doing. We will do our best with this. Okay, we've done it. And then you can even, after that game session, get feedback and say, hey, how did everyone feel about how we handled that session? Does anyone have ideas for something better? I played with a group at one point that did a lot of blue booking, and blue booking was big in the 80s and 90s, and it's not so much anymore. But the idea was that you would literally all have one of those college blue books to write in for journals. And while someone was having spotlight time with the GM would set everyone else, okay, write about a scene that builds on your character's background or story that does not involve having to make die rolls or major uh, moments of gaining or spelling loot, right? But maybe you're going to write about the character having taken a walk through the woods and having come to grips with these feelings of loss ever since his animal companion died. If a group is into that, and then you get a series of little short stories, and when they're done, you can say, all right, everyone can share those around with other players to read in between. Nowadays, of course, you can do that with, if everyone has it, you can type up at your laptops while one person plays and then share it around, put it on a wiki, whatever. None of these solutions work for everybody, but if you've got this big toolkit, you can, when these problems come up, bring the toolkit of options to the players and say, hey, this is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I would like to try. What do you all think?
I like it. I like it a lot. I also, so talk to me a bit about like as you're let's see, a couple I tend to avoid Scooby Dooing. Yeah, yeah. We've talked about that in the past as well. But I'm curious when you're thinking about, uh, people. Let's imagine you've done all the things right. You've already, the players are well aware that you're going to have this split, and that it's going to be a focused on an individual. And how much work do you do with the table on the characters that they may play, if that's the route you're going?
Um, Whatever they are comfortable with, honestly, right? I will pitch something specific, like in the example of you're all going to play low level newbie rogues so that the senior rogue can be challenged as a leader to see if he can get you through all these things
Mhm.
alive. Um, I will ask, does anyone care what rogue they get? And if I'm with a lot of the people I play with, they'll be like, no, just make, I don't want to have to make a character I'll only get play once. Make me a simple rogue, put it in front of me, give me one sentence of RPG notes, and we'll take it from there. Um, I have also, I have done things like that and had someone say, okay, now I really like this character that I played this once. Can they
Yeah.
come back? Can we have them mentioned again? I had a long running campaign where, for a specific character who is a commander of a wall of a castle under a siege, everyone else temporarily played members of the militia that one night was pulling together to try and hold the wall while the other characters went off and did things. And those players enjoyed those other characters so much, we literally spun off another campaign, which we called the Kids campaign, which was about them playing these characters they'd become attached to, who were lower level, who became sort of the step and fetchits for the higher level characters. And one of the things that would sometimes happen is if there was not a good reason for everyone's high level character to go be in a place or do a thing, people had these character trees. Okay, I've got my high level character, I've got a mid level character, I've got a low level character. For all the big epic stuff, all our high level characters go. Oh, but I want to go investigate the mysterious description of giant cockroaches made out of glowing skull bones wandering through the moors. Not everyone else wants to go, but I'm going to take the low level characters with me so that they can take notes, carry my stuff. And if everyone's into that, you can have sort of these overlapping campaigns where you've got Venn diagrams of what's going on. And there are games that actually have character trees built into them so that you say, okay, all of your experience goes to your top character, and then you will have 2 characters one level below that, and 4 characters one level below that, and 8 characters one level below that. And if your main character ever dies, someone can graduate up your character tree. But then you'll pick any of the, you might have 12, 15 characters in a game. Some of them you might only play once, but it means that when we are determining what's going on, hey, this is going to be an assault on the mage's citadel. Everyone has at least one mage that they have made in their character tree. All the mages are there. Some are higher levels than others. You can get some of that sort of Gandalf and the dwarves dynamic where Gandalf shows up with the dwarves, they deal with the issue, then
Mhm.
Gandalf buggers off for a while, then he comes back, then he disappears again. Um, but everyone knows that all the rewards are all going to the whole tree. And so if your top character goes up a level, everyone else marches with it. So if I'm playing one of my lower level characters, all my characters are still benefiting from that. Some groups love character trees. It is especially good for people that have, 8 character ideas for every campaign slot available. And they can also serve some of the NPC roles you'd sometimes put together, right? Like if one person said, I really want to make a blacksmith who occasionally goes out fighting, then anytime someone says, hey, can I get a blacksmith to make me salt-tipped arrowheads, that PC becomes the person that does that. And then when they go and ask them, they can actually have an in-character conversation.
I love it. I want to encourage also the channel as well, as you are thinking about your adventures. And I'm really curious. I love a good house rule, and I'm curious as to how people have thought to manage the people around the table beyond. We always touch on sort of the bad actor, the recalcitrant, and all that stuff, but this is really more about creative ways that you either saved the party from having to split, or something that you might have done that sort of amplified the experience for all involved. That I find that a very fascinating uh, line to travel, and I think that experience makes that. I'm imagining that it's manifold. There's just so many different ways that people have tried to
And
tackle that stuff.
there are entire group play styles that handle these questions
Ah,
differently.
interesting.
And I'm going to talk about that for a minute. Troy, if you'll check your Facebook, we have a piece of art from our friend Stan.
Oh yeah.
So I have played in groups. I would say most groups I play in with ongoing campaigns. The assumption is that this one person is the GM, these 3 or 4 or 5 people are the players. Each of those players has one character, and when we all get together, we all play, and we might be on a big long quest or a giant dungeon or sailing on a ship, and so it's assumed we're all together. There are groups, and I've been with some that do this very successfully, where instead the paradigm is here's a shared world. There are 2 or 3 people who may run games in it. And everyone has a jumble of characters, and most of the adventures are one game session. So whoever can show up, they get to play, and we'll pick characters each time. I did this very successfully for a long time with a lot of different groups, superhero games. So it was like, we have the International League of Heroes and the Sentinels and the Vanguards and the Brigadiers. And these are all groups that have a whole bunch of different heroes, and you might not have all those characters at every session. If people are on patrol, there might just be 2 or 3 people patrolling the city. If there's an attack on a bank, there might only be a few people that can go there. If there's an earthquake, it might be that not every character has something useful to help in an earthquake. And we're like, okay, most of you are directing people towards emergency tents and doing that stuff. Oh, but the 3 of you are dealing with the solid stone tyrannosaur that caused the earthquake. So there are entire setups that you can do that have a different feel, and therefore when you get something like a solo game, it's just more natural to be able to say, hey, this one person's going to do this one session, and then that person might not be in the next session at all, and we'll have 2 or 3. That can be a scheduling nightmare, but for groups that it works well, it can be a great solution to having a constant churn of who's present, what characters they play, or what's going on, that can create a interesting dynamic for the people that are okay with that sort of might not always be there every week feel.
We're ready to show this if you want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
We obviously from earlier today when we were trying to broadcast and we're succeeding. There we have Stan. Refresh. Patience is a virtue. And here's the thing. Patience as a virtue applies to our entire topic tonight, right? If you as a player know that things have gone in an unexpected direction and the GM is trying to get through someone else's solo time, be patient. And if there's going to be a problem, mention afterwards, hey, I didn't enjoy sitting around and not doing anything for 2 hours that much. What can we do as players to help you, the GM, avoid having to deal with that issue in the future? And just, again, communicate. The vast majority of intersocial problems in RPGs can be fixed by calmly and without accusation having a conversation about what was and wasn't fun. If you all were sitting down to play foosball and one person kept screaming booyah at the top of their voice every time they scored a point and it hurt other people's ears, you'd sit down and talk about it. You wouldn't just go, well, there's no rule that says it can't scream booyah, so I guess we just have to live with it.
Right.
These role-playing games, especially with groups that aren't just about what's in the rule book. They're a social event where you're getting together, and whether you know it or not, will have formed either intentionally or accidentally a social contract. And addressing that contract occasionally is a useful way to keep things from becoming big problems when they are revealed to be little problems.
Absolutely. And I think that just goes, I mean, that is just the wisest advice that you want to apply to every facet of your life. I want to show something here. So there's a lot more to unpack with this, but I realize now, I don't know how this happened, but it is 2:54.
It
And,
is.
we've only got an hour before your skin suit starts to degrade. And then, your
Yeah,
scales.
today in particular, my skin suit is just barely holding together.
But this weekend we're going to be at the RPG Alliance convention, the 20th and the 21st, and we are going to be doing we've got Malcolm Shepard is going to be he's going to be talking about kind of playing and being a GM and sort of like exploring a little bit of what we're talking about, sort of an advanced course in sort of the sociological impacts and how to manage that within the game in the context of a tabletop role play game. And brilliance is just going to come with that for sure. I mean, Malcolm was just a delight to listen to and hang out with. But then we're doing it on Sunday, Mutants and Masterminds Sunday, with Crystal, Steve, and myself, and oh yeah, and Alex will be there as well. And then Alex is also running an actual play that evening of Mutants and Masterminds. It's going to be 5 hours,
That should be
and
a lot of fun.
it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's brand new. No, it'll be never before seen content. You can pick up tickets. I'm going to be dropping a link to the updates in chat. But yeah, come check it out. The other thing too, the tickets are just incredibly inexpensive. It supports a great group who's doing great things. They're doing an online and an offline component, and the offline component is it's in Canada. So if you are Canadian, you're going to want to take a click and see if they're close enough that you can participate. But lovely, lovely team. So very excited to be able to be there. And there's something else that I almost forgot in the actual the way they're doing this. They're doing something called Gather Town, and it's basically kind of a 3D world, or a kind of it's not really 3D. I'll say it's sort of like you're walking, isometric, top down video game kind of thing. And did that go through for some reason? Looks like it didn't. But we'll send it again. But the idea is you can explore the world and you see all the stuff within this digital framework for a convention, which I think is super fun. You explore, find new things. There's going to be lots of different prizes, but somewhere there on the grounds is a life size 1-to-1 to your avatar ship from Ships of the Expanse. So you'll be able to walk around and check it out, and there are going to be some Expanse games being played. It's just a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it, and I love that we can convention from our very own homes. It's very, very comfy, but yeah, this is good. The technology is really strong, and it's got all kinds of stuff like, oh, and if you and I were talking right next to each other, I'd hear you loudly, but if I move away, you kind of fade away. So it's got
Right.
that kind of proximal audio kind of setup. But yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. And then I'm trying to think of what else is cooking. That's really that's been on my mind forever. Uh you know I will mention this off mic, but we've got some cool things cooking that we'll be talking about more in the coming weeks. But it has a lot to do with things over at the Age Creators Alliance, and we're looking forward to hanging out a little bit more with that crew and encouraging other people to contribute. Owen, as we reach the final moments, do you have anything you would like to share?
So I think sometimes as players, we can get really into wanting to take the role of our character in a role playing game. And I think it is important for us to consider that there might be times in which we want to modify that character's behavior. What our first knee jerk thought is, um, so that we are helping everybody have more fun, right? Uh, no one's ever perfectly in someone else's head, including your character's head. So if you're thinking, hey, my character's going to go look at that disturbance all by myself and not tell anyone I'm going, just give it a moment and think, hey, maybe I should say, hey guys, I see something over here. Someone want to come with me, and just involve other players yourself so that you can avoid some of these issues.
Yeah, yeah, and I also think, pass the mic. Let people
Yeah.
step ahead and be sort of, and really be cognizant of, how much of the mic time you've taken. When you're sitting around a group like that, it creates a real feeling of like appreciation and sort of trust and it also just gets you just a damn fine story. Always more fun than not, but Owen, I think we've reached the end of our ThursdAGE today. Thank you for hanging out with everybody, and thank you everybody for their comments and questions and puns. And we, like I said, this Sunday is Mutants and Masterminds Sunday. It takes the place of Mutants and Masterminds Monday, but it's also 90 minutes, so you get a little more for your Sunday buck. And then,
Sounds like
of
it's going to
course,
last until Monday.
that's right. It's gonna be the longest Mutants and Masterminds Sunday Monday ever. And Owen, you and I come back on next Thursday, and for ThursdAGE with Owen and Casey Stevens, and we've got some fun stuff planned coming up. And so make sure to keep your eyes on the news and any updates over the coming week, and then we will see you next Thursday. Thank you, Owen.
Hey, folks.
Bye.